and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And this week, as Republicans lose their minds over transgender rights, we welcome Dr. Dana Beyer, retired executive director of Gender Rights Maryland, to help us better understand all the issues around transgender girls and women in girls and women's sports and other issues facing the transgender community.
There's a lot to clear up, a lot of misunderstanding, so we're really happy that Dana can join us to do some of that. Meanwhile, the U.S. House again passed the Equality Act, our federal LGBTQ civil rights bill, but it faces a very uphill battle in the Senate, to say the least.
Unless you get rid of the filibuster. A leading national evangelical social service agency says they will no longer discriminate against LGBT parents.
Follow the money. We mourn the loss of lesbian-feminist pioneer Ivy Bottini.
There was a victory for Polish protesters who stood up for LGBT rights.
Amazing. And there was a big lesbian kiss, well, at least a nice lesbian kiss at the Golden Globes.
And I'll give you my review of Supernova, about a gay couple grappling with the dementia of one of the partners.
But we're going to start with our guest.
Dana Beyer, are you there? Hello?
I'm sure start introducing her. She'll pop right up.
Well, Dana Beyer, MD, is the retired executive director of Gender Rights Maryland, made a good run for the state Senate in 2014 there, served on the boards of Equality Maryland and Freedom to Work, a retired eye surgeon, and was the person behind getting the Gender Identity Rights Bill passed in Maryland in 2014. Welcome.
Hi there, Andy and Ann. Pleasure to be back and see you again.
Pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to see you. You know, I read a quote today from State Senator Sarah McBride, out transgender in Delaware, state senator, and she said, to foster social change, you've got to meet people where they are in an accessible way that challenges them, but still with a language that resonates with them. So here we are amidst this the Republicans seized upon transgender girls and women in sports as a big issue. And we want to have a conversation about it because we do get viewer email about this, people wanting clarification on things. And there are all these bills being passed against it in the state, and it's the controversy in the Equality Act. So we wanted to talk to you about that and help people understand it better.
I think there are two ways we want to approach this. One is from the science, because people make a lot of assumptions, a lot of stereotypes around that, and then the politics of it and how that's all being handled. But let's start with the science, because people just make an assumption that a trans woman has this incredible advantage physically, naturally, over cisgender women or girls in sports.
And that's true, that they do make that assumption, and it's a very useful sort of wedge for them to get in now. That's why they do it. There's nothing in the Equality Act that deals with sports specifically, but they're using that because it whips people up the way they whip people up over bathrooms. I will say I like Sarah's comments, which are very Biden-esque, about, you can't create change in
Delaware.
Right. Well, of course. And that's a family thing. You guys know as well as anybody that we didn't get to where we are today on the gay front and the trans front without doing exactly what she said. We didn't just belligerently assert that these are our rights and we're going to take them and have everybody fall in line. We came out one at a time. We organized, we rallied, and then we built relationships, and people got to know their neighbors and their friends. And now we are 50 years post Stonewall. at this great crossroads. And we've made great progress. And it's important for the community to know that. Now, the sex part of it is interesting. This is far more interesting than trans people in bathrooms, which really has nothing to do with sex. We won those battles. I won the first one actually in 2008, defended and won that in court. And then the final one was in 2016 with HB2, where North Carolina lost roughly $5 billion because the corporate America joined the trans community and said, we're not going to participate in your state if you treat people that way. Once they lost that, they were looking for another wedge into this issue, and they chose sports. Now, let's be clear, the vast majority of people who compete in sports are not doing so competitively on a high level, and there's no problem whether somebody's trans or not. I have not heard of any complaints on the club level, the Little League level, or anything like that. That's not an issue. It only becomes an issue when it's competitive. Now, it's important to note, this is not a new problem. Trans athletes and their allies have been working on this now for decades. The International Olympic Committee has standards. The NCAA has standards. The AAU has standards. Everybody around the globe has standards. So it's not as if people woke up one day and went, my God, there is a problem here. It's a real problem. Let's figure it out. They've been figuring it out for a long time. And as our knowledge about the science advances, the biology, those metrics, the standards can be tweaked here or there. So for instance, the standard that the IOC uses now is serum testosterone levels. That's the male sex hormone, right? Androgens, which we all know about because we lived through the PED controversy in baseball for 15 years, which is really the same thing. And you two and I are old enough to remember when East German women and Russian women were winning Olympic gold medals because they were basically trans men at that point. They had been doped up on testosterone. So this is not a new issue. The international athletic community has been dealing with it now for at least 50 years. I think they're still tweaking it. The real problem today centers around a classically intersex athlete named Caster Semenya from South Africa, a short distance runner, 200 meters to 800 meters, who's won Olympic golds. But by being intersex, a particular form of intersex, where her serum testosterone levels are elevated compared to the rest of the women, that's now become a bit of a flashpoint. And we can tie that in with the trans community because I believe trans people are intersex as well. That's something that's a little bit more controversial. I do want to say, and this isn't a plug for CBS, but any of you who have access to CBS streaming and you've ever watched the program The Good Fight, which was the sequel to The Good Wife, which was very popular about a decade ago. Last year, season 4, episode 6, had a great episode dealing with exactly these issues. Trans athlete, intersex athlete, twists and turns. A lot of the issues today we will be discussing were brought up then. Some language which illuminates the ignorance most people have about this. What is sex? What is gender? How does this play out? What's fair? What isn't? Is in that episode. So I recommend that people check that out because it's very well done dramatically.
Well, you say there isn't any real problem at the lower than elite level sports, but let's just, for those who don't understand, let's just take a second to explain the issues that are scaring people at the high school level, say, or the college level.
Right, and it's
and talk about puberty blocking and all of that.
So it's at the high school level in this country where the Alliance Defending Freedom, the ADF, has decided to search for cases. In America, we have a federal system. And when it comes to schools, it's even worse than that because we have local control of schools. So each school district has its own rules as far as this goes. And there are almost 17,000 school districts. So you can imagine how chaotic it gets. Trans girls these days may transition without any kind of medical intervention. An adolescent trans girl, and I'm using girl up to the age of majority, say at 18, who transitions after a male puberty without hormones, has an advantage. That person is physiologically male. She's gone through a male puberty. She has a male bone structure, she has a male muscular structure, and if she doesn't do anything to change that, she has an advantage over most cis girls. Not all. There are some cis girls who are outliers as well, and there's more diversity when it comes within the girls and within the boys than there is between the two. But if somebody transitions, just says, hi, I'm out now, I'm a trans girl, and I want to compete without having taken hormones for a year, year and a half, it depends. That, to me, is an unfair advantage. Now, I do want to say there are many people in the trans community and elsewhere who believe that sports is a human right. And as a result, trans girls and trans women should be able to compete regardless of their hormone status. This plays out again in the Caster Semenya example. She's not trans. But if there are rules for competition, it can get a little bit difficult. Now, if somebody came out as trans as a child, underwent puberty blocking, so never went through a male puberty, and then underwent cross-sex hormone treatment, so that she's then very much like all the other cis girls, she is absolutely no different from any cis girl anatomically, physiologically, with respect to that sport. Now, I suppose you could say that is a special situation. The irony of this is, like in the UK now, the High Court there has ruled that trans kids can't get any medical care. So trans kids can't get puberty blockers. And this will be appealed and such, and I don't expect it to stand. But they're basically complaining about trans athletes as adults, but they're not allowing them to undergo the proper puberty, not the wrong puberty, which is awful, and then be just like all the other cis girls. So simply put, trans girls who transition socially but not medically have a physiological advantage. Trans girls who transition medically as well do not after a period of about a year and a half. It's different for the trans boys. Testosterone works much more quickly than estrogen does. So with estrogen, it takes about a year or two for the muscle mass to basically melt away. And I think it's fair to say, and most trans women will tell you this, I learned this, I was a marathon runner, and my times dropped by about half an hour after my medical transition, because when you lose that muscle mass, you're not only back to zero, you're worse than zero, because you now no longer have the muscle mass to manage your larger skeletal structure. So there's a disadvantage there. They're doing research on this. There was a recent study of 20 trans women and showed that they had a 5% advantage in, I think it was fast muscle twitch times and such, even a year and a half out. These are the differences, the changes that the sports authorities can negotiate. These are the ones that have been negotiated for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Shouldn't be a problem. But it's now been weaponized because this is something that the fundamentalist right wing believes, and the seditionist caucus believes they can use to beat on trans girls.
And they are. Legislatures are passing essentially bans on trans girls participating in sports at all.
Right.
They want genital inspections in some cases. Right. They want all these kinds of things. What do you expect? So they're passing some of these laws. What do you expect?
Actually, nobody's passed them yet. Well, they've passed in maybe one chamber or another, and then there will be legal challenges. So
Tennessee Senate did, Montana Senate did this week. That's part of the news this week, and we'll see what happens in the other chambers and what the governors do. But what do you expect to happen with these laws constitutionally, legally? I mean, and also could it deny some of these districts federal education funding because the Biden administration is trying to protect trans rights in schools?
Well, you know, that goes back to, say, the passage of Medicare in 1965. I don't know if you remember, I'm certainly not old enough, I don't think you are either. When Social Security was passed in 1935, it didn't include Black people, right? Medicare did include Black people. And that was a touchy issue in 1965 in the midst of the civil rights era. So the federal government, LBJ's, administration, told Southern hospitals that they were going to get no federal support unless they integrated. No Medicare, and Medicare is quite the trough of money for hospitals and physicians. They were going to get none of that unless they fully integrated. That carrot really worked to change American society. Can the Biden administration do it? Sure. Now, I believe that the Bostock decision last July basically obviates any of these state laws because there is full, on the basis of sex, protections for trans people and gay people, right, from discrimination. And that includes Title IX. It's not just Title VII, it's Title IX as well, and that's sports.
And yet racial discrimination is illegal, but the Supreme Court keeps striking down, keeps upholding these racially discriminatory voting laws.
Right, but that's not the same thing as actually saying banning somebody from a track team or something, which I think would get a little bit more attention. I don't think that's going to work. Then again, I think, look, it's important to note, trans people make up 0.6% of the population. That's fewer than 2 million people. We are no more than the last survey that was done, came out last week, I believe, 11% of the LGBTQ community. You got to search far and wide to find a trans athlete who's good enough to win. There are a few elite trans athletes around the globe in, I think, rugby and such. This isn't a problem. They found some trans female athletes who won in Connecticut, and they filed a lawsuit. But for the most part, that's not an issue. And I think the parents of trans kids in Montana or Idaho or wherever are not going to have a difficult time filing suit against, the state to protect their own kids from participating. And again, sort of going back to what Sarah said, you've got to be able to communicate with people. And having, run the trans community political agenda in Maryland and worked on the Hill and such, I got a lot more out of actually sitting down with Republican staffers and explaining this to them because they had no clue what this was about. Right. And the times you can actually pull them away from their bubble, and we have our own bubbles, and you can communicate and let people know that it's not an issue. Those who work in this and are looking for a weapon and won't let go of that weapon, like the big lie, are not going to let go. But you can reach a lot of people and explaining the science to them and the politics and the numbers.
We did pass in the House the Equality Act, and certainly Republican right-wingers started raising this as an issue. And I'm trying to get a sense from the people bringing it over to the Senate, where it is going to be difficult to pass without getting rid of the filibuster. Right. But are they even considering, putting this on the table as something like some sort of amendment? I mean, and then of course the religious freedom amendments. And the feedback I'm getting is, no, they're going to go with the House bill. But what are you hearing?
They're going to go with the House bill. It's unfortunate we live in a culture where we don't have, I guess a gang of 4, a gang of 8, or a gang of 12 sitting in a back room somewhere and hashing this out. The main difference, there is a Republican Equality Act that's out there that's modeled on the Utah bill of 2015. It's really all about religious liberty, or what is defined as religious liberty. As somebody who was raised in a religious community, in a religious household, I would say they get it all wrong, but that's a different issue, and I've interacted with them on that level. But if you could sit down and work this out, there really is no reason, again, as I've said, to ban trans girls from athletics if they have hormonally transitioned. Some people on my side, on our side, would dispute that and would not accept it. But I think a majority would if that came up. I don't think that's going to come up. I think it's all about religious freedom and the rest, and mostly about RFRA, because our bill says you can't use RFRA, to protect yourselves on this issue. And we go, yeah, no, you can't. And they go, yes, you can. I mean, I'm happy with the 1964 Civil Rights Act ministerial, exemption, but that's not enough today. Now, what is it, 56 years later? That's something they can negotiate. I don't see why this can't be worked out, honestly, but we don't live in that kind of an era now.
Yeah, you're talking about a rational conversation.
Right. So unless some rational people, and I guess there's, maybe you can get Bill Cassidy and Mitt Romney, to sit down with some members of the LGBT caucus to thrash it out. It's certainly not going to pass if the filibuster isn't killed. if the filibuster is killed, what are Manchin and Sinema going to do? And, you know, Kirsten is her own special case because she's bi and she's a member of our community. And, you know, this is politics. It's fascinating. It's unfortunate we're in this position. But, you know, the Biden administration knows how to negotiate these things. I wouldn't be surprised if they can. This is not a priority, by the way, right now. I mean, COVID relief is a priority and all the economy. But maybe come this summer, you know, when people are vaccinated and they're no longer on their phones all day and they're out playing and they're going to ball games and stuff, maybe tensions will cool a little bit and people will be able to sit down and thrash that out.
Well, tensions weren't cool in the halls of Congress. You had Representative Marie Newman for Democrat of Illinois. We have a picture of this. She has a trans daughter. She responded to attacks from Marjorie Taylor Greene across the hall, putting a trans flag out, and then Marjorie Greene posted this hateful sign: there were two genders, male and female, trust the science from a Republican. And then Rand Paul went completely ape on Dr. Rachel Levine, really attacking her and tracking transgender, the existence of transgender people in general, which Dr. Levine handled very coolly. But when you see this issue becoming to the front and center, how does it make you feel that this has become like the most controversial in the movement these days?
Well, other than the fact that as an ophthalmic surgeon, I am terribly mortified by everything that Rand Paul does. And if I had the opportunity, I'd move next door to him on the other side from his other neighbor, and I would take him down with that. It's an absolute utter disgrace. He should lose his license. I don't think he still has a license. He should lose his MD degree. He had a fake. He created his own certification process to become board certified. He's a complicated character, but his father was too. His father was a bit of a fascist and such. You know, he enjoys that attention. We give him, the media gives him attention like that. I'm sorry that Dr. Levine had to sit through it. She handled herself pretty well. Maybe she could have used it to teach him a little bit. The Q caucus, well, they don't know what they're talking about because they're talking about anatomic gender. There's no such thing as an anatomic gender, and male and female is not gender, it's sex. Man and woman is gender. I mean, they really don't get it. And when they say trust science, they mean science, S-I-E-N-C-E, as SNL, you know, show, not S-C-I-E-N-C-E. But I do want to come back, you know, before we run out of time, to the Caster Semenya issue. She has always been female. She is intersex. She's never announced what her particular intersex condition is, but it seems pretty obvious, just clinically speaking, that she has very high levels of serum testosterone, and the IOC has mentioned this. So she spent her entire life, from her time in utero through today, being bathed in much higher levels of testosterone, which her body has been able to see as a signal and has given her an anatomy, a habitus, a physique, and a physiology that's far more masculine than the average woman. She's always identified as female.
Well, one thing we talk about in relation to her is that, you know, there are men who are 7 feet tall and men who are 5 feet tall, and we don't give the 5 feet tall men some kind of special standing to play basketball. People have physiological differences and different skill sets and everything else that makes for diverse populations, and not everybody is qualified for everything. So why should Caster Semenya be forced to lower her testosterone levels to compete as a woman when she is a woman in track and field?
Right, and that's where I come down on this, politically speaking. But when the IOC has standards created for trans women, but they're not discriminating there, they're just saying for women of 10, you know, nanograms per milliliter, and she's above that, even though she's woman and female by all the other standards, she gets caught in that, and they're not flexible enough to say, well, the standard holds for people who transition, not people who are born intersex. And this is where the complications come into effect. I agree with you. When I was a child watching Wilt Chamberlain play basketball, I thought he should have been banned from the NBA because he completely ruined the game. He knocked everything out of whack. They had to change the width of the key, everything for him. And I'm not even talking about his sex life, but it's like he ruined the game for a lot of people because he was a physical outlier, like a 3 sigma or maybe even more than that statistical outlier in the day. You're right. Why should a sport like that have somebody like, I don't know, LeBron's not quite like that, but some people are so much better. I use Michael Phelps as an example. Michael Phelps, as a guy, is physically built in a way that he's almost like a dolphin. I mean, his legs, his feet are more like flippers. He has these huge physiological advantages, yet he's allowed to compete. So why isn't Castor, who's one of those rare intersex conditions, allowed to compete as well? But
all right. Well,
we've got to deal with that. So,
we are running out of time. At the end of this month, on the 31st, it's the Trans Day of Visibility. Do you have any recommendations for people who want to get involved in this, want to help, using that day, using every other day of the year? What's your recommendation to people?
Well, I've always believed that the most important thing anybody can do is come out. And it's on a one-on-one situation. When somebody comes out, be their friend, or start off by not being their friend. Don't run away from it. Engage with them. Maybe when you can go out and have a cup of coffee again, sit down and talk to people for a half hour and an hour. And once you've done that and you see somebody as a human being, it's much easier to sit down and listen to these discussions and come down on the more humane side of it rather than not. You can always get involved in any kind of organization, and we have them, there's no end of them. But the best thing to do is meet people where they live, because this is where the whole mission for trans rights and for gay rights was true then, and it's still true now. We've got to help people get jobs. We've got to protect them from violence. If you want to protect Black trans women from violence, we need to legalize sex work. There are a lot of different ways to get into this, to be able to make a difference in your community. You can help people with halfway houses and shelters. There's no end to the way you can help people. And in New York in particular, you've got Callan Lord and other facilities that deal with the LGBTQ homeless population. I mean, that's 40% of the homeless youth population in America. It's a huge problem. And in many places, you can get involved and make a difference there.
Thank you this was terrific. We appreciate you being with us, and we will provide more information in our email about you and your work, so people can be in touch with you.
No, that's okay. I'm always willing to take questions from anybody and happy to participate, and I hope make a difference.
Thank you, Dana.
Stay well, both of you, and
Thank you, Dana.
Protect yourselves, and enjoy New York, and I hope you can get out to Broadway soon. And I'd be happy to join you.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Let's get to...
Well, of course, it was a hell of a week. I mean, it was Tennessee and Montana that passed these anti-transgender.
And a sad footnote to this, I am just checking as we're talking to Dana, my news clip feeds. It's just been announced that the South Korea's first transgender soldier, who was kicked out of the military for being trans, has been found dead at home. No cause of death announced. The implication is perhaps taking her own life, but we don't know that yet. We'll follow up on that.
Right back here at home. I mean, this is in Minnesota. It's a bill. They have a Democratic legislature, so it's probably going nowhere. But they have a bill that would give criminal records to transgender girls who play sports, 90 days in jail if they enter a locker room. But the American Psychological Association did something good this week. They did a resolution opposing efforts to reject or attempt to reject a person's true gender identity. And the professional associations have been terrific on this.
Impeccable across the board on this and on conversion therapy and on LGBT stuff in general for a long time. And I'd like to think that makes a difference, but it's hard to know because there is such ignorance and prejudice out there. And the ACLU has also put together a campaign for the Biden administration to issue an executive order that would mandate correct federal IDs for trans and non-binary people. The different agencies have different policies across the government, so they want that standardized and updated.
And we should celebrate the passage again in the U.S. House, Democrat-controlled, of the Equality Act. It passed 224 to 206 with 3 Republicans voting for it. Brian Fitzpatrick.
Fewer than last time.
Well, because moderate Republicans are getting pushed out of the party. You know, Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, John Katko of New York, Tom Reed of New York, and the rest of the moderate Republicans, a lot of them didn't vote for it, but Trump listed them and he wants them thrown out.
And there is this alternate proposal by Republicans for a different version of the Equality Act that would water down these religious discrimination protections and, allow any business with fewer than 15 employees to discriminate against patrons. Yeah. If you're a small restaurant, you're allowed to throw trans people out.
It's not worth passing. You can't call it an Equality Act.
The Log Cabin Club.
Oh, sure.
I know we barely mention their names anymore. They oppose the Equality Act. They say the Bostock decision in the Supreme Court is enough protection, and that the Equality Act, as passed by the House, is dangerous, is mind control, and is too pro-abortion.
Look, I'm just concerned that they might want to make some concessions about this in the Senate, and I'm pressing the organizations who are celebrating the House passage to say what is on the table and what is not, because don't forget, they completely eliminated transgender years ago in order to pass the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. So we don't want that to happen. And, again, it's got to be the same for every category. You can't start making exceptions for the gender identity and sexual orientation categories. All right. Okay.
Well, we might as well go to our governor.
I call this the men behaving badly segment of the show.
Understatement. I'm just continually struck by what appears to be, and I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here, appears to be the utter incapability of many men, not all, many men, to understand the inappropriateness of their come-ons to women.
It's always been inappropriate. It always hurt. But finally, there's a reckoning about this. And of course, with this governor, there are now 3 people, including we have Anna Ruch, R-U-C-H, who we did it to at a wedding, where there's actually a picture of it. So ACT UP demonstrated against him, but not mainly over the fact that he's also cutting healthcare services and AIDS services. So look, we've had an antagonistic relationship with our governor over a lot of issues over the years. And
the LGBT Bar Association of New York, otherwise known as Legal, canceled their plans to give him an award at their annual dinner, I guess, the Community Vision Award. Now, they didn't cancel it after he was revealed to have concealed half the nursing home deaths due to COVID. But when he was revealed to be charged with sexual harassment, then they did cancel.
It's not just concealing the deaths. It's sending the old people who were sick with COVID back to the nursing homes to infect everybody else, and then claiming, I'm doing this according to CDC guidelines. Now, come on. I mean, anybody who knows how a virus works would know that that's insanity. Did he just want to kill them all off?
Well, he claims they had recovered and he was freeing up hospital beds for others who were actually sick.
He did a better plan. Now, of course, back to sex. Of course, Trump has been credibly accused by 20 women of sexual harassment and rape. And yet he is the god of the family values conservatives who showed up at CPAC, and they claim to be on the side of righteousness. So And then there's Representative Madison Cawthorn, 25 years old from North Carolina, who voted against the Equality Act. 30 of his former friends and classmates have come forward to accuse him of sexual harassment, misconduct, and other inappropriate behavior. His whole campaign was built on lies about himself and about his opponents, Republican and Democrat. He just made up things.
And then appeared on The View and was lauded as a new young conservative hero leader.
He's a punk.
Yeah.
And then there's Nicole Maliotakis, the lesbian Republican Congress member from Staten Island, Brooklyn, who also voted against the Equality Act, and her LGBT constituents are planning a demonstration at her Brooklyn office on March 13th. More details to come.
And what about Adam Kinzinger? What's he doing voting against the Equality Act? All these guys.
They're conservatives, and they're conservatives. They're not. The party is very far to the right, even when it's not pro-Trump.
All right.
Better news: Arizona in Pima County opened its first homeless shelter for LGBTQ youth. Bread and Roses Crisis Center serves 18 to 24-year-olds. That's
Tucson. And in addition to providing shelter for about 8 young people at a time, they have a very impressive list of counseling that they offer on acquiring housing, getting health care, jobs, and dealing with substance abuse. So
the big news and the big breakthrough this week was Bethany Christian Services. It's an evangelical organization with 1,500 staff nationwide. It will now, some of its units have already served LGBT people, but it will now serve LGBT families, offering services, they say, with the love and compassion of Jesus to the many types of families who exist in our world today. They do about 3,400 foster care placements and 1,100 adoptions in 32 states. Now a reminder, we await the SCOTUS decision, the Supreme Court decision, on whether Catholic social services could exclude gay parents in Philadelphia. But Bethany's been doing this for a while. The Southern Baptist Convention is disappointed in Bethany.
Well, they did. Some of their places did it started doing it a few years ago, and then they got caught up in the Philadelphia thing because they and the Catholic Social Services Agency were both accused of rejecting LGBT parents for foster and adoptive kids. And Catholic Social Services went to court and fought the loss of city funding for their agency. And Bethany said, no, we don't want to lose that funding. And we do have a little experience of doing this elsewhere. So we're going to go ahead and start to open up to those parents. And they've now expanded it to a national policy. And as you say, they're getting a little pushback from within their evangelical denomination.
Well, the Southern Baptist Convention is set to oust 2 of its churches for being too inclusive of LGBTQ people, St. Matthew's Baptist Church in Louisville, Kentucky, and Town View Baptist Church in Kennesaw, Georgia. They're going to affiliate the latter with the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, which lets its members set its own LGBTQ policies.
Well, as we see, change is coming more at the grassroots and not in the U.S. Congress.
All right.
Well, would the Bethany Church work with the throuple in California if they wanted to adopt? There's a question. 3 gay men formed a relationship some years ago, and they have 2 kids, and they have fought for some time to have all 3 of their names on the birth certificates of the kids because they are all the parents of the kids. And I'll always remind you that birth certificates have to do with who are the parents in real life, not necessarily the people who gave birth to the children.
And they testified in court. They wanted to make a big issue of this, and they said, look, if we're going to get the kids on our health insurance plans, if we're going to be able to go see them in the hospital, we have to have legal rights. You have to recognize us.
And the judge at first said she was opposed to this, but she listened to them and listened to their explanation of their relationship and their relationship with their kids, and she changed her mind. And so she ended up saying yes, they should all be listed on the birth certificate. So that's official now with this throuple in California.
She said it takes a village to raise a child. Now, she didn't say that.
Or at least 3 people.
It does, at least. All right, we want to mourn the passing of Ivy Bottini, a fierce lesbian feminist icon who spoke truth to power in Los Angeles and West Hollywood for more than 50 years. She's died at 94. She was born in New York, and she spent 16 years here as the art director of Newsday. And she co-founded the New York City chapter of the National Organization for Women in 1969 and designed the logo that they still use.
Yeah, that's where I first ran into her around now. I wasn't a member, but as people came together and were feminist activists then, she was...
Betty Friedan purged her and other lesbians in 1970. Mm-hmm. In 1971, she head out for Los Angeles. She co-founded the Coalition for Human Rights, the LA LGBT Lesbian and Gay Police Advisory Board, the AIDS Network Los Angeles, AIDS Project Los Angeles, which is now APLA. In 1978, when there were, the Harvey Milk and the No on 6 campaign that was so... She was the Southern California deputy director of that. And, she was the first out LGBT person on the California Commission on Aging. It goes on and on and on and on. She was just a fierce activist.
She wrote a book called The Liberation of Ivy Bottini, a memoir of love and action. And on her deathbed, she made her pastor promise to make his church more LGBT friendly. So we have viewers who are filmmakers sent us a little clip of Ivy in action just in the last couple of years, speaking at a rally in LA. And we thought we'd show you that to give you a little of the flavor of Ivy Bottini.
We have been too safe for too long that we think it's how it's going to stay. It's not going to stay. We are on the brink of losing it. At 92, it feels like this is where I am supposed to be saying this. Get off your asses. I don't want to hear somebody say, oh, but it was, I was so tired.
Mail and ballot. Yeah, absentee ballot.
I don't know, I'm just so tired. But it's only one vote. Yes, and it could be the losing vote. Right. All you need is one to have a majority. I'm eyeing your tail and I'm watching you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivy Bottini. She's survived by her daughters, Laura and Lisa.
A big loss. These fierce older activists, what a model for all of us.
Yes.
Really terrific.
That was very inspiring. It might even keep us going.
Exactly. Well, Tom Amiano is also inspiring. What a guy. Activist in San Francisco for many, many years. Activist, comedian, former president of the Board of Supervisors, former mayoral candidate, and considered quite the progressive gay activist.
79 years old now.
Well, in 1959, he was a student at the Immaculate Conception High School in Montclair, New Jersey, and he was a track star. He'd been very effeminate in high school and bullied a lot and not popular, but he found he had some talent as a runner, and so he was on the track team and did very well. But he was deprived of his letter sweater as a varsity track star.
Well, and he saved up and bought the sweater. They just wouldn't give him the letter.
He figured his coach thought he was too gay, too effeminate to get it. Well, now he has finally been awarded by the school, by the Immaculate Conception High School in Montclair, New Jersey, his letter sweater. And that is a huge deal, particularly from a Catholic school in New Jersey.
Well, not 79, but gay blogger Andy Toll, who has been doing the Toll Road blog since 2003. We have a picture of him then and now. Is packing it in, though his blog will continue. He says he wants to go back to creating things. We're very grateful for his creation. It's really an indispensable news source.
He's going to keep writing for Toll Road, but no longer be the editor-in-chief. Michael Goff is going to stick around there running it, and I think there are others who are going to be involved. And it's Toll Road, not Towel Road.
Right. It's TOWLE, but it's said toll. Like a toll road.
The Queer Liberation March is number 3 will take place on June 27th, Pride Sunday here in New York this year. We go out in the streets no matter what, and Reclaim Pride Coalition has announced that, yes, we'll be doing another one. We're starting to figure out where and what that will be. You're welcome to get involved, and we're soliciting community input for what the issues and themes should be. Last year was the Queer Liberation March for Black lives and against police brutality. Personally, I think that could be the theme every year, but we want to get everybody's input. So if you go to, where did I put it?
ReclaimPrideNYC.org. ReclaimPrideNYC.org. I will give you the full link in our email. And if you want to sign up for our email, go to our website at gayusatv.org.
But go to that link and you can just throw us a few ideas of what you think is important to you and to everyone. Also fascinated to see a new census report, the top 10 cities with the most LGBT households in the U.S., San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, Orlando, Austin, Miami, Boston, Denver, Phoenix, and Baltimore. Not New York, because it's
far and away the most. It's just not a state yet, and we're going to make it a state.
That's true.
In New York City, the major candidates for mayor were asked to rank the last 5 mayors, and most put David Dinkins first and Giuliani last. But many said, but Andrew Yang put Koch first. Most put Koch down, and they cited this because he was so miserable on AIDS. They're very conscious of that, and that's good.
I'm afraid Andrew Yang is just turning out to be tone deaf on a lot of stuff.
And yet he leads in the polls because of name recognition. Trump gay Rick Grinnell is looking to run for governor of California if Gavin Newsom is recalled. He's urged to do so by Sean Hannity and Matt Gaetz. But at the CPAC convention, when he tweeted something about this transgender woman who was there at the conference, and we should welcome her. He got totally pushed back, and people said, forget it, you're against God.
All right. Well, on that note, can we move to international news?
Please. We told you that we're trying to get same-sex marriage in India. The government took the position that it's not a fundamental right, and marriage is a bond between a man and a woman. We'll see what the court says. They're going to hear it on April 20th.
It's this long-time dispute. Can the court declare it as constitutional, or does it have to go through the legislature? The government is currently telling the court that it has to go through the legislature. We'll see what the court says. Meanwhile, the Bermuda and Cayman Islands marriage cases were heard by the Privy Council in the UK. No decision yet on that. We'll follow that.
But the big news is from Poland, and this is a little surprising, but great news. Activists there, 3 women, they made posters, and we have a picture of it, with a rainbow halo around the Black Madonna, the Our Lady of Czestochowa, and the baby Jesus. And they were arrested for offending religious feelings.
Well, the reason they did it was because the Catholic Church there had put out this screed about how disgusting and sinful we were. So they did it in reaction.
Yes, and because cities were banning, at the behest of the Catholic Church, creating LGBT-free zones. They faced 2 years in prison, and they were acquitted. They're found not guilty.
This is by a local court in the town of Plock. And so this could very easily be appealed to higher courts. But
can you appeal when you're acquitted? Can the state appeal it?
That's a good question. I don't know how it works.
Can't do that in America.
Well, I'm just saying that I don't think the federal government is going to give up on their attacks on these crowds. You've seen the huge protests in Poland, including on these issues.
And abortion, especially.
Right.
So in Tulum, a gay couple was arrested and handcuffed on a beach by police because they were kissing each other, these two guys, and the beach goers gathered around them and said they didn't do anything wrong. It's not against the law. Stop this. And due to the pressure, they relented and they were let free.
And in Malaysia, where we're not used to winning much, a man arrested for gay sex won a court challenge to the Islamic sodomy law. The court declared the anti-gay law unconstitutional. However, the secular law, the non-Islamic law, the secular version of the anti-gay law, Section 377, is still in force. But this guy won his case on declaring the religious law unconstitutional.
2 weeks ago, we told you that in Ghana, they opened up a gay organization. Last week, we told you that the government shut it down. This week, 67 prominent people in the United Kingdom, and we have pictures of 3 of them, Edward Enninful, who edits Vogue, Naomi Campbell, and the famous actor Idris Elba, were among 67 who signed a letter backing gay rights there, condemning Ghana for its crackdown, and petitioning for the protection of the LGBT community and support for them from the government.
Violence against LGBT people in Cameroon is escalating. A gay couple and a gay man separately were found to have been murdered with no police action taken to try to bring anyone to justice. More than 21 LGBT people have been arrested for practicing homosexuality, 2 of them trans women, 12 youth, 7 men. People are worried about government-sanctioned violence escalating in Cameroon.
Well, speaking of hate crimes, in Scotland, the Catholic bishops have joined a lot of Protestant sects to oppose parts of a hate crime bill that would limit their ability legally to make negative statements about LGBTQ people. It creates a new crime of stirring up hatred against the protected group. I have to say I am against these hate speech laws because they could come at us and say, well, you're saying negative things about religion and you're whipping up a hatred against them. So let's leave speech out of it. And, incitement is a crime, and hitting people is a crime, but it shouldn't be about speech. But they don't have a First Amendment there.
Well, maybe it's not a crime, but I owe an apology for my speech last week about Arkansas, which I said was what they called Pennsylvania between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. And in fact, Andy was right. It's Alabama that they call central Pennsylvania.
Okay. But Arkansas, where I have a lot of people, it's tough these days.
Yes.
All right, AIDS news.
Congratulations to our associate producer, Bill Bowman, whose activism with the New York State Health Commissioner got Mount Sinai Hospital, where he serves on the Community Advisory Board, to prioritize people living with HIV for the COVID vaccine. This is a developing issue because people haven't always been willing to prioritize people with HIV who may have compromised immune systems as needing the vaccine. But Bill won a fight.
Congratulations, Bill. And in Philadelphia, and I don't know why this isn't statewide, but and hi to our Philadelphia viewers, if you have HIV, you are now eligible for the vaccine in Philadelphia. In California, the Equality California Institute has launched a bilingual public education outreach campaign with the state to promote vaccine and testing among LGBTQ people of color, especially who are twice as likely to test positive for COVID as non-LGBTQ plus whites. The help center is at covid19.eqca.org. I'll put that in our email.
We told you last week how Virginia has gotten rid of some of its criminalizing of HIV, but in Dayton, Ohio, a man was arrested for having sex while HIV positive without disclosing, no questions about whether he was actually transmissible or not. The local news freaked out, man with AIDS having sex. The next court hearing on it is coming up on April 20th, but there's a large movement, in part run by the Zero Project, SERO, if you want to find out more, to get rid of these laws criminalizing people with HIV.
The Catholic Archbishop of New Orleans and the U.S. Bishops' Conference are saying no to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine as it is morally compromised by using abortion-derived cell lines in development. This is, of course, pro-life. Go out and die of COVID. You can't have the vaccine. Now, the Vatican and the Pope have said the other vaccines are okay. They haven't weighed in on Johnson & Johnson specifically, but good grief.
All right, can we go to the Golden Globes?
Please.
Horrible telecast. Awful. But one bright spot, Jodie Foster won and kissed her wife, Alexandra Hedison, right there on national television.
One for the Mauritanian, which is about Mohammed Ould Salahi, who was tortured and held on Guantanamo for more than a decade. And she wants Guantanamo closed once and for all.
I thought they were wonderfully loose and natural. I think Jodie Foster, ever since her 2013 speech at the Golden Globes, where she came out, people said she wasn't explicit enough, but I thought it was a fantastic, emotional, moving speech. And she was just terrific with that kiss.
She plays the defense attorney in that movie. And then bisexual Gillian Anderson won Best Supporting Actress in a TV series for playing Margaret Thatcher in The Crown, and the Best Comedy Series was Schitt's Creek, which has a lot of gay content.
And Spike Lee's kids, who were the Globe presenters, they always pick a couple of celebrity kids, so even though they didn't nominate him, they used his kids. They announced that their target charity was Callan Lord. Which I thought was interesting. And other LGBT people lost a lot of things, but those were the highlights. That's all you need to know about the Golden Globes.
Staying on Gillian Anderson, she's set to play bisexual. She's bisexual, set to play bisexual Eleanor Roosevelt in Showtime's new series, The First Lady, on which filming has just begun.
And Michelle Pfeiffer is going to play Betty Ford. And Viola Davis is going to play Michelle Obama. That'll be cool. And
you can see Mrs. Roosevelt portrayed sooner on PBS's Atlantic Crossing with Harriet Harris playing her, and Kyle MacLachlan as FDR. That makes me feel old. We have only a few seconds for you to tell us about Supernova. I'm just going to recommend Supernova. It was very moving and very finely observed. Colin Firth, Stanley Tucci as a couple dealing with onset dementia of one of them. So, I do recommend it. Some people are quibbling about non-gay. This is going to sound funny coming from me. You never even think about the fact that it's a gay relationship. I mean, it's just not an issue in the film, all right? It's just all very well done. It's about caring for each other. How much time do we have? We have, we're down to our last minute. I'm just shaking the 21 seconds. Can we play 21 seconds, Rich, of the lesbian and gay Big Apple